So how does a man who was constantly seasick, a man who literally vomited during surgery training, and was, by all accounts, terrified of public fights, how does he become the person responsible for completely redefining our place in the universe?
Well, that's the central question, isn't it? That's the contradiction at the heart of Charles Darwin. We're doing a deep dive today into the sources on his life, his incredible journey, and the really profound personal price he paid for a revolution he never even wanted to start.
Yeah, and we're looking at where his ideas came from and why, for 2 decades, he kept what he called the true story of life on Earth completely secret.
A total secret.
So our mission for you is pretty simple. We want to pull out the key moments in Darwin's reluctant journey. We'll go from his, let's say, unpromising start all the way to the publications that basically turned science on its head. This isn't just history. It's the foundation for almost all of modern biology.
It really is.
Okay, let's unpack this.
So when we look at his early life, you really have to see how accidental all of this was. Nothing about young Charles Darwin screamed genius or destiny.
Not at all. He was born in 1809 in Shrewsbury to a pretty wealthy family. But the records show his teachers they didn't think he was special. He wasn't a prodigy in that traditional sense, but he was deeply, you could almost say, painfully curious.
Right. And we know he much preferred collecting beetles and, doing little chemistry experiments in his shed to actually studying.
And that curiosity, that passion, it immediately clashed with what his father wanted for him.
Oh, absolutely. His father, Dr. Robert Darwin, was a very successful physician. So naturally, he tried to push Charles into medicine. But the biographies are really clear about this. Darwin found it all horrifying.
He couldn't stomach it. He actually fainted.
Twice.
While watching surgeries in Edinburgh.
And you have to remember, this was before anesthesia. It was a brutal, bloody business, and he just wasn't cut out for it.
So, okay, medicine is a total failure. What's plan B? The church. His father sends him off to Cambridge to study theology. The goal was for him to become a quiet country clergyman.
And this is where you find the most incredible, stunning irony in the whole story.
I know. The man who gives us the scientific framework that basically dismantles the biblical creation story.
Was on his way to becoming a priest. It's amazing. But that detour is, weirdly enough, the most important thing that could have happened to him.
How so?
It bought him time. He wasn't in a demanding professional track, so he could indulge his real passions, geology, botany, natural science. He just read everything.
It's that academic drift that really sets the stage for the big moment, right? In 1831.
It was a pivotal moment.
Yeah, picture this. He's 22 years old, awkward, gets sick easily. He's never really been away from home. And he gets this invitation.
An invitation to join a 5-year voyage around the world as the ship's naturalist on HMS Beagle.
It was just the luckiest break imaginable.
It absolutely was. He was technically there as a gentleman companion for the captain, Captain Fitzroy, not just as the official scientist. And the sources all emphasize that the world he saw on that voyage, it just systematically broke down everything he'd been taught.
And the Beagle took him to places that were just, completely alien. He saw the vastness of South America, the Andes Mountains. He found these bizarre fossils in Patagonia. And then, of course, there were the Galapagos Islands.
And through it all, he's just meticulously cataloging everything. But the more he saw, the more these uncomfortable questions started to pop up, especially about variation. Why weren't things the same everywhere?
This is where it gets really interesting, because it's the subtle differences that start to haunt him. For example, he sees these giant tortoises, and their shells are shaped differently depending on which island they're from.
Right. Or the finches. They look like they should be the same bird, but their beaks were all different, perfectly tailored. Some were thick and strong for crushing nuts. Others were thin and sharp for picking out insects.
They were cousins, not clones. And the big idea back in England was that every species was created perfectly for its environment and never ever changed.
Immutable. Fixed. And Darwin's evidence was screaming the opposite. Why would God create 10 slightly different versions of a finch for 10 little islands? It made no sense.
So he had this huge intellectual gap to cross. He started to think that maybe nature itself was doing the tailoring, that life changes. And that thought must have been terrifying.
It was, and he captured it in one of his private notebooks. He wrote, one might really fancy that from one original stock, many forms have been developed.
And there it is, the seed of evolution.
The foundational idea. But when he gets back to England in 1836, with all his specimens and notebooks, he just shuts down. He sits on this explosive idea for 20 years.
And that silence is so important. You have to put yourself in, say, 1840s Victorian England. The Bible wasn't just a book of faith. For most people, it was the scientific authority.
It was the history of the world.
Exactly. So to suggest that life changes, that humans are related to animals, and that some blind material process was behind it all, not God. I mean, that wasn't just a new idea. It was scientific dynamite.
He knew it. He knew it would cause this furious conflict between science and faith. It was a cultural upheaval waiting to happen, and he wanted no part of it.
But he wasn't just hiding. During those silent years, he was building his case. He was meticulously stacking up the evidence so high that no one could knock it over.
An incredible amount of work. He spent years dissecting barnacles, studying fossils. He bred fancy pigeons to see how traits were passed down. He figured out how coral reefs formed.
He was trying to prove that tiny, gradual changes could, over immense periods of time, produce huge results.
And that's how he crystallized the mechanism, the engine behind it all, what we now call natural selection. He realized that the perfection you see in nature, a moth's camouflage, a flower's shape, it wasn't a one-off act of creation. It was the result of a process.
And the process itself it's almost brutally simple. We can break it down into 4 steps that Darwin saw. The first one is just variation.
Right. Simple as that. No two individuals are ever exactly the same.
Yeah.
There's always variety in a population.
And that variety is critical for the second step, over-reproduction.
Which is to say, nature makes way more offspring than can possibly survive. This creates a constant, brutal competition for resources, a struggle for existence.
So that idyllic view of nature is just gone. It's a battlefield. And that battle drives the third step, right?
Exactly. That competition acts as a filter. And that's step 3, survival advantage. The individuals who, just by chance, have some useful trait, a slightly thicker beak, better camouflage, they're the ones who survive longer, have more offspring, and pass on that winning trait.
So it's not about being the best in some absolute sense, just better suited for that specific place and time.
Precisely. And the final step, number 4, is accumulation. Over millions of years, millions of generations, these small, useful advantages build up, they compound. Eventually, they result in a whole new species.
The implications of this, if this is true, then humanity isn't the center of creation.
We're not special. We are just another branch on this huge, tangled tree of life, shaped by the same blind forces that shape barnacles. And that's what terrified him. He was afraid of the backlash, of course, but he was also afraid of hurting his wife, Emma, who was deeply religious.
The sources show he was just tormented by it. He might have taken the secret to his grave, honestly, if fate hadn't intervened.
And it did in 1858. A package arrives from a young naturalist named Alfred Russel Wallace, who's out exploring in the Malay Archipelago.
And in that package is a paper outlining a theory that is almost identical to Darwin's own secret work.
Natural selection. Wallace had figured it out completely independently.
Can you imagine the shock? 20 years of painstaking secret work and someone else just figured it out on the other side of the world.
He was faced with this incredible dilemma, but ultimately he chose to publish. And it wasn't just about ego or claiming credit, it was a sense of duty. The idea was too important to stay hidden any longer.
So in November 1859, On the Origin of Species is released. It sells out on the first day. And the reaction is just a complete firestorm.
Total firestorm. Many scientists were blown away by the logic and the sheer volume of evidence. Religious leaders were not happy. They saw it as a direct attack on morality and God.
And the public debate just raged. Darwin himself, true to form, mostly stayed out of it. He got physically ill from the stress. The newspapers were full of these cruel caricatures of him as an ape.
But the idea was out. It couldn't be put back in the box. And then, a couple of years later, he published The Descent of Man.
Which is really throwing gasoline on the fire.
Oh, yeah. This is where he finally said what everyone suspected he believed. Humans evolved. We share common ancestors with the great apes. Our minds are morals. It's all natural, not supernatural.
And Victorian society just exploded. But the amazing thing is he only wrote it because that's where the evidence led him. He just followed the logic, no matter the cost.
Which brings us to the personal toll. This revolution took a profound toll on the man himself.
His life was plagued by this chronic, mysterious illness. Intense anxiety, insomnia, stomach issues. It's very likely that the stress of keeping that secret for 2 decades literally made him sick.
And on top of all the scientific drama, he suffered this terrible personal tragedy. He lost his favorite daughter, Annie. And that just tore him apart, intensifying his own internal battle between the science he knew was true and the faith that was so important to his family.
He was caught between his mind and his heart. But he kept going. He believed that the knowledge, the truth, was worth the pain. So what does this all mean? How does this 19th century naturalist's work affect us right now?
Well, Darwin's ideas aren't just in a history book. They are the absolute bedrock of modern life sciences.
Okay, give us an example.
Think about medicine. Antibiotic resistance. That is evolution happening in real time, right in front of us. Bacteria with random variations that help them survive our drugs are the ones that reproduce. That's pure natural selection.
It goes way beyond that, right? We're talking genetics, ecology, even psychology.
It even influences computing. The sources point out that some artificial intelligence models are designed using Darwinian principles. You create random variations in code, and the program selects the versions that perform a task best. You're literally evolving a solution.
So his real gift wasn't just a theory, it was a completely new way of seeing ourselves.
Exactly. We're not these static, perfect creations. We are survivors. We've been shaped by billions of years of time and struggle and constant, unending change.
You know, Darwin never set out to be a revolutionary. His legacy is really about his incredible curiosity, his patience, and ultimately his courage to just look at the world as it really is, no matter how unsettling that reality was.
He showed us that the deepest truth about life on this planet is that everything that lives evolves. Everything that survives adapts. The story of life isn't written by some grand decree. It's written by nature itself, moment by moment.
And that leaves us with a final thought for you to chew on, something inspired by Darwin's journey. What accepted beliefs do we hold today about our society, our intelligence, our own identity, that future generations are going to look back on and challenge, just like Darwin challenged his world?
That's a powerful question.
Because if Darwin taught us anything, it's that evolution isn't just a biological process, it's a mental one. And maybe his greatest gift was giving us the courage to question everything.